Hello everyone. I'm Soumya. I'm a senior research fellow at Good Business Lab. Welcome to this session on empowering blue collar workers, workplace solutions for financial inclusion. Blue collar workers often lack access to formal financial products like savings, credit, and insurance. This leaves them very vulnerable to economic shocks and they might be low on financial resilience levels. Now, workplaces can play a very transformative role by offering access to such products. And this session is more about how both workers as well as workplaces can benefit from creating enabling such access and giving products and services that are suitable to this segment. I'll let Smith introduce him.
Hi everyone, I'm Smith. I'm research director here at Good Business Lab. And as Soumya mentioned, at Good Business Lab, we are essentially trying to find things, intervention programs that work at the intersection of worker well-being as well as business outcomes. So just to kind of highlight uh, this important point, as Soumya mentioned, for a lot of blue-collar workers, they're one of the first major interaction with finances come through their workplaces, and many of these where we highlight gender aspects of these interventions and sectors. We want to kind of highlight how workplaces can benefit by kind of getting involved with financial lives of workers through kind of being conduit of a lot of different products and services which can benefit access of workplaces as well as data of workplaces. So just to get us started, Somit, do you want to kind of talk a bit more about some of the aspects that blue collar workers face, especially some of the workplaces like garment sector, which has predominantly women workers, and how gender also plays a role in there?
Yeah, thanks, Smith. So to start with, Good Business Lab has been working for quite a few years with garment workers, and we find, these workers already have access to bank accounts, right? They have their own bank accounts. They receive their payment of wage payments through these bank accounts, and still, they are still far away from true financial empowerment. For instance, if you can, especially among women, right? For instance, one of the first things where you do when people receive bank accounts is that for how do you use your debit cards, right? And we see that there's still a long way to go before people start using their debit cards for making transactions, for making payments and stuff. So again, within this, if you women specifically use are less likely to use their own debit cards and they are more likely to rely on others to withdraw money for them, right? For instance, only in our case, we find that 91% of men could withdraw money on their own from using their debit cards, whereas only 65% of women could do when we surveyed factory workers in an urban factory in Karnataka. Now, if you take, for instance, UPI transactions, which India has been very famous for, and it is growing by leaps and bounds. Again, there is still a gap. Like only 85% of the men knew how to make these UPI transactions, whereas only 59% of women could make. So, as you can see, that this gender gap has been quite pervasive in terms of making payments and transactions as well. Not only that, one moment you see look at the savings and credit that they get from the banks, again it is even lower. So there is still a long way to go to achieve true financial empowerment, and just opening bank accounts is only the first step. To reduce their reliance on cash and informal credit and savings, workers have to start understanding to how to use these accounts to their benefits. How do we enable access to them? How do we reduce the barriers in getting these products, right?
So that's great, right? So Soma, you highlighted essentially we're talking predominantly work which is done in India, where we have had massive government efforts to get everybody access to banking accounts. And many of the workplaces are now using digital transaction to kind of do their payments, right? Uh, One thing I wanted to kind of ask you to elaborate more is that, for example, when you talked about this aspect, gendered aspect of kind of financial transaction in households, especially when women have their account, get their salaries in their own account, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be the ones who will be essentially accessing all that money, right? So there are two aspects to it, right? Like, um, how do you then understand this intra household transaction better, right? So we have a project where we are trying to understand this better through digital financial diaries of workers, right? We're trying to capture a data, year-long data, to understand these specific aspects of financial lives of workers better. So, given that this financial inclusion barrier exists, but similar digital barrier exists as well, right? So, how do you kind of now use a tool which itself is digital, right? So, if you could talk a bit more about challenges and how do we address those challenges of building a financial diary that workers can use consistently, that will be great.
Yeah, rightly said, Smith. So, for instance, let's begin with why won't women withdraw money on their own, right? There's so many reasons behind this. Like, for instance, one of the things is that literacy, right? Like, they are still worried about what if they use how to use this debit card, what if they lose money while making such a transaction, and what happens next. So, and the next thing, like for instance, can be mobility barriers. Like, if women still have to go to the ATM, where the ATM machines are, and then withdraw the money. And women have much more mobility barriers than men. Now, and then comes the confidence and trust in these systems. Like, how confident I am because I have never handled money before in my life. Now, how do I make this transaction? Like, feel confident that I will be able to do this, execute this, right? So these are some of the barriers that women face. And in fact, a lot of times when we did our qualitative surveys with women, we find that they have expressed a lot more fear and also a lack of literacy in making these transactions. Given this, we wanted to still make use of a digital tool to understand their financial lives, because we thought there is so much more merit in maintaining digital records. Given that digital records means that the apps can give you instant reports of how much you've spent, where all you have spent in, how much you've saved in the month, and so on. But these are women. A lot of them don't own a smartphone on their own. They have not used app-based products before. Now, this is one of the biggest barriers that we have to break. So to start with, what we do is that we first talk to these women, understand what is the kind of transactions they deal with, right? We interviewed women every day over a period of 2 weeks, to see that okay, these are the everyday transactions that women deal in, how they what are the intra household transfers they make. That is, do they surrender their entire salary to their household members, or they just keep some for them and then give the rest to the others. So what are the other kind of cash inflows that they have, what are the outflows that they participate in, and so on. Now, based on these interviewing both men and women, we understood what are their broad transactions like, and we made a very simple design of app where it will be much easier for women to choose uh, to make a transaction record. Like, for instance, all I have to decide is whether I did an outflow or an inflow, and based on that, within that, what category of inflow or outflow I had on a particular day, and then I enter the amount. If I want, I can enter more details about specific details to have a better record or more accurate records. Now, this is the first step on the app designing part, and then these app design also should take into account the lives of these workers and the kind of transactions, and it should be able to cover, like in a few steps, most of the transactions that they make in a day, right? And the second thing is that now comes the training aspect. Now, you really need to make sure that the training is delivered to them, and they are able to practice making these transaction entries, with some different examples that they have done, right? And that they have experienced in their lives. And then after this training, it still doesn't break the barrier finally. Like, for instance, even after the training, we've seen women, when they go near the tablets, they just stand far away from that, as if they are still afraid, or of making a wrong transaction entry, or making an error. What if I commit a mistake, right? So we also make sure there is point of contacts, support people, if whenever they have questions, whenever they don't know how to make an entry, we support them in the initial few weeks.
Just to add some more context there. So, as many of these women don't own smartphone, don't know how to use it, we kind of decided to kind of have this app on a tablet, which is placed on a shop floor or a place they work, right? So, this is where they could go. There's a point of contact who is there to help them to kind of enter their transaction. This handholding is especially important during the first few weeks of this project. So I think that's where we are trying to kind of get them to learn this, but there's also someone hand holding them at the workplace to kind of break this initial barrier that Soumya talked about.
Also, it is important to understand that a lot of these women have never been involved in budgeting, household budgeting tasks also, right? For them, it's like, they just surrender the money to somebody, or somebody instructs them, okay, these are the payments that you have to make, or these are the things that you have to handle, and they handle those transactions. But the household budget as a whole, and the decision making process, a lot of women are not involved in. Of course, some women are involved, but still there is still a long way to go there. So given this, when they start making these transaction entries, they start realizing what are the kind of transactions they are doing, how much money they are giving to different members of the household, how much they have saved in that month, how much they have spent in different categories, be it even a 10 rupees a day that they spend on, let's say, buying milk, or buying flowers, right? So they start to understand what the patterns look like. They also start to understand what kind of unplanned expenses they have. Imagine seeing your everyday transaction record for the past few months. Then you start to understand, okay, I know that 10% is something that is always unplanned, right? And this is something that I might have to account for the future. So these are some things that they learn over time, and when they start building this habit of making transaction entries. And this project has really helped, especially women, to understand what is financial budgeting, what is management in terms of tracking expenditures and savings, and so on, right? But then there is more to it. What did we understand from this project?
Yeah, so I think there are a few major things that I want to highlight, right? So I think, as Soma said, right, we learned two things. One biggest kind of first step for this project is to how to kind of design products that are suitable for this population, and how what are the mechanisms through which I'll talk about the next project as well. Secondly, we realized that many of these women have a lot of intra-household responsibilities. For example, some of the women essentially give up almost all of their resources to their household members, and then get small fraction where they make decisions, right? So, and we see a lot of heterogeneity across different state of women on this, right? So I think other thing is that essentially cyclical nature of some of the transaction in India, especially how big role festivals play in lives of people, and how a lot of times one of the things that qualitative surveys also showed, women realize small expenditure that they do regularly, how they add up during the month, and how much they can save through this, right? So, as well as then for us, it gave confidence in terms of digital literacy of women, where there are evidence where some women now feel who are part of this experiment or the measurement now want to came up to us, said that they want to continue this tool without any handholding support, as well as some of them now wanted to actually own a smartphone where they now feel confident of using it, right? So these were many positive outcomes for us. But one thing that we learned specifically that I want to highlight is the liquidity crisis that many of these women face, right? So even if these are formal jobs that we are studying, this study population, they still are kind of low paying jobs, right? So these workers do face liquidity crunch. they have small savings, and many times there are many shocks throughout the month which they cannot absorb, right? And they majorly rely on informal borrowing to paper over the shocks. Either some of them are for this informal are both. Once some of this they get from their friends, family, which essentially is interest-free kind of credit line that's offered, or some of it comes from high interest rate money lenders, right? And these are the two sources that these people access, and this is what we try to address through our workplaces and next interview. Samay, do you want to quickly talk us through the flexible salary advance and how we kind of design this experiment?
Yeah. So the flexible salary advance is a facility that is given to the workers where they can withdraw 50% of their earned wages at any point of time during the month, and they can do it up to 3 times in a month. Now, for instance, if I'm a worker who earns like, let's say, 9,000 per month, and I have worked like 10 days in the month, I might be, eligible for withdrawing up to, let's say, 2,500 for the 10 days that I worked. And so I can choose 2,500 as my earned wages, and 50% of that, that is 1,250, is what I'm eligible to withdraw. And I can choose to withdraw up to 1,250. Now, if I choose to withdraw the money, then the money immediately gets credited to the bank account in which I'm receiving the salary. Now, also, we realize that there these to give this kind of an access, you can give it through the mobile app design, right? Like an earn wage access app that you can install it on your smartphones, and then you can withdraw at any time. But then we also realized that in this particular group of women that we had in our project, around one-fourth of women only had made any UPI transactions, and a lot of them did not have smartphone access itself. So given this, we thought the best way to provide this kind of a facility would be to, like in our previous project, install a tablet on the factory floor with the earn wage access app loaded on it. And then all women have to do is that they have a QR code attached to their ID cards, and they go to the tablet, and then using the QR code, log in into the app, and then enter the amount that they want to withdraw. The transfer of money is instantaneous, right? And this is what we had implemented in one of the factories in North Karnataka.
Yeah, so I just want to add some more context, right? So many of the factories or formal firms do offer this kind of credit line to the workers they do, right? So the setting where we're trying to introduce this project also has this facility, but the take up is abysmally low because uh, this is this is not a something that workers can get by default, right? Like they have to fill in an application, somebody has to approve it, and there's a lot of subjectivity involved, right? Also, the transactions are not done in real time, where if the processing time is like a week, workers need that money that day, right? So I think what we wanted to address is that we could essentially provide this instantaneous access to workers. The major reasons why a lot of firms have reservations or a lot of processes to do this is that the line that they offer to workers, they are worried that what if the worker leaves, right? So the major advantage of this earned salary access, right? It's not salary access, earned salary access, that we are linking it to the workers, essentially attendance data at the back end and their salary data at the back end, so that we know exactly how much that worker has earned, right? Like, so even if the worker leaves next day, firm still owes that much money to the worker. So there's zero kind of risk of worker leaving or for not paying back the amount to the factory, right? So this is what allowed us to kind of design system where factories are also brought into this picture, right? One of the great thing that we observed was one third of the population through the study period of 1 year use this at least once. There are many people who use multiple times. One of the reasons why we wanted to test this through an experiment or RCT is there's a lot of literature that goes back to payday schemes, right? Where workers or people who fall short of money in their last working days get kind of a supplementary loan for that day, right? Called payday loans. A lot of research from that literature say that workers might get into either break their kind of financial discipline or get into like cycle of debt for them, right? So we wanted to see whether this has adverse impact. So luckily for us, we don't find any adverse impact. So what we find is that 1/3 of people use it. And then the reason why a lot of people are taking this essentially salary advance is to repay loans. So 40% of usage is the major reason of using this is where people are repaying some of the loans, right? Uh, Also, the second largest reasons we find is essentially expenses related to their children. So, a lot of literature shows that women a lot of time take more responsibility over expenditure of their children. And so, a lot of time we said where there's an illness in the family for children, there's some school fees, school say books need to be bought. That's where a lot of this transaction happened where workers withdrew money, right? We also see workers essentially reporting that they didn't forfeit some of the necessary expenses like food, right? So in the endline survey, when we're measuring, did you have to forfeit some of the essential expenses like food, buying groceries due to financial crunch, we see that being reduced due to this app, right? So I think this is where we see, and we don't see any increase in regrettable spending by workers, right? So this is not breaking their financial discipline. Workers are using to cover up their financial shocks, but so we do see amazing benefits for workers through this project. But how does this essentially help businesses as well, right? So we see this essentially provision of this service or amenity at workplace. It reduces turnover of the workers by 1/3, which is a large amount, right? Like so, during this time, average turnover is around 11.5%, while we see almost 1/3 reduction in that of this attrition, right? In a setting where turnover is a big financial cost for businesses, this results essentially shows that it essentially helps businesses to retain their workers better. And that's why I think this kind of products or services that can be accessed through workplace can essentially tremendously improve welfare for firms as well as workers.
Just to add to Smith's, evidence or from what we found on the flexible salary advance. So, if you look at all the qualitative evidence that we have from these workers, first of all, workers have told us how when they face this unplanned expenses or when they have an like for instance a medical expenditure of 1,000 rupees and they do not have the money in the middle of the month, it stresses them out, right? And there are times that they've said like I couldn't even sleep for a few days. It affects my work, it affects a lot of things that I do on a day-to-day basis. So and even among those who can actually take support from their family and friends by borrowing 1,000 rupees and then repaying them when the salary comes, there is still something a kind of a vulnerability there, right? Like because you're exposing your personal issues to your extended family members or to your coworkers or friends by seeking such support, and this might reduce your morale, right? And it may not be a very happy thing for you to do. So that is the reason why, even though these women were earlier using their family or friends support to tide over these kind of liquidity crunches, they were so happy to opt to a flexible salary advance because a lot of workers shared with us is that I'm using my own money to overcome these kind of emergencies, and I also get to prefer to spend on those kind of emergencies which I think is important to me, right? And this gives them a sense of self-efficacy, sense of confidence to raise money for emergencies, and they always don't have to rely on their family members or other or money lenders for this kind of emergencies. That is one thing. And as Smith pointed out, that a lot of them have really enjoyed using these kind of apps. For many of them, they have not used such apps before. Even they even though some of the women actually have their own smartphones and they do have UPI payment apps installed in their smartphones, they always have to rely on their son or a daughter or their spouses They give their phone, and then why don't you buy something from the grocery shop and come, right? Women have expressed this. So now they start using these apps. They are like, I will now start using my own things. Why? I will now start using my own debit card. I feel more confident to use my smartphones. And some of the women actually gone to express the saying that I am more confident to use an app now, so I'm thinking of buying a smartphone for myself, right? That is one thing. And then the in the worker financial diaries project, we find that these women are so happy to understand how budgeting is done and how financial management skills that they could pick up. They could actually see where their a lot of unnecessary expenses go, and they are able to cut down a few hundred rupees here and there, and they are able to save that better, right? These are some of the positive aspects again that comes from these kind of interventions. Though we started off with a segment where the digital literacy is low, financial literacy is low, we are still able to show that with the right kind of apps developed for them, with the right kind of training provided for them, and with the right kind of support systems that you can have, uh, it's very good, especially if it comes through the workplaces, because workplaces are where there are HR people, there are there are welfare officers at the workplaces. So even if something goes wrong, they know that okay, there is someone I can seek seek trust from. And this increases their confidence to come to a workplace and ask for and have better financial empowerment. Of course, one thing we also want to highlight is that these are some barriers that we can break through the workplaces, but there are also other barriers. Like for instance, we have also heard instances where women have said that don't want to use the flexible salary advance facility, even though they had access to it, because their spouses outrightly rejected them to use it, right? So we understand that there are different barriers that women face, and some of by providing access to access and support at the workplaces, we definitely solve some of the barriers. And still there is a long way to actually then go in terms of truly being empowered. And once they start feeling empowered, they also understand the value of being in the workforce, value of being employed. Because if you're only employed and to just pay your family's debt, or none of the money stays with you, or you are truly not able to decide anything for yourself, then when the conditions, when they are not able to work anymore, or they do not want to work anymore, they will just quit the jobs, right? And this is most often the case for women, because they don't have a sense of ownership of their own wages for many of them. So these kind of support systems can actually make them feel much more have a sense of ownership of their money and what they want to do with this money that they earn.
Yeah, thanks for summarizing so much. So I think we are coming at the end of our session, and I just want to kind of highlight few major learnings for us, and I think we want you to have from these sessions, right? Like, so essentially, even with workers having formal jobs, but low paying formal sector jobs still forces workers to kind of navigate around their resources very delicately. They do face a lot of shocks, and there are facilities or new age solutions that workplaces can provide to workers that can help workers, especially women workers, to improve their essentially digital literacy, financial literacy, get more aware of their own finances, as well as address their liquidity constraint. And this helps to essentially worker in their stress, as well as essentially having more agency and self-efficacy. Along with that, essentially this helps businesses, where this increases firm retention and other firm outputs, where firms have positive return on investment through investing in these facilities for their workers. We have many financial inclusion is one of such domain in which we at Good Business Lab work. We have a lot of works which works in health, um, workplace amenities, training for workers, and we are very happy to provide more details about the work that we're doing in financial inclusion, looking for positive interaction with many of the people at financial institutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to us.